Voilà.
Catherine Weir is from England, and I've read her book, and I realized the importance. She is a true reference in the world, and I think that teachers that read this, and not just teachers, because her book is called Happy Educators, Happy Teachers Change the World. And I think that happy doctors change the world, happy bakers change the world. I mean, everyone that's happy can change the world. And this book will change the life of educators without a doubt. If educators go to school and they have peace, an inner peace, and an understanding, then they can convey that to the children. She not only has written this book, but she also has a great experience behind her as a teacher, and she is doing a very important task in her community in London as a person that's very, very committed, very activist, and it's an honor for her being here with us. So please welcome Catherine Weir.
Thank you. It's always difficult if people say lovely things about you because you have to be as good this image, but I would have been sorry if you didn't see my image here. It's a mixture of a mole worming its way in and a Trojan horse. So I've called it the Trojan mole, and if anyone here in the audience has got artistic skills, could you draw me an actual Trojan mole? So once we get it through the door, it works. Because it isn't just a toolkit, and Thich Nhat Hanh has a really helpful quote here, which is to see it as a path. Right mindfulness is, first of all, not a tool or an instrument, it is a path. Right mindfulness is not a means that can be used to arrive at an end. True mindfulness is not only a path leading to happiness, it is the path of happiness. And I think that's really quite a profound thought. And it has a really profound impact on what we think school is about. And this may help Albert and his Why Was I Educated? I think if he'd been educated in a school that is being talked about here, he might have found it a more satisfying experience. What we're really trying to do is to make a school become a second family, where the teacher, the students, and the whole school, the parents as well, see it as a joint effort to create a place where it's not just about the future, about your career, job, position, or your money, but a place where you actually enjoy living and enjoy learning and enjoy exploring right now. And I think that is, it sounds again simple, it's a radical thought for many schools. The idea that the main purpose is for everyone to look right now, what are we doing? And if we could get that right, to take your point, Guillaume, that if we sort it inside ourselves, we've sorted the future. If we could sort schools to be somewhere where everyone is accepted, not just the clever children, not just those who are good performers, I think we would have made such a difference. This is a quote from the book, by the way, from one of the teachers who talked about this. Next key point, really, is that the way out always starts with ourselves, that we have to apply our own oxygen mask, to use that familiar aeroplane metaphor, because peace in ourselves, as Guillaume says, is to find peace in the world. So we don't start with curricula for children. We start with working on ourselves as teachers. And these are some nice quotes from some teachers we worked with about what they got from a course. Since the start of the course, I have been able to control my emotions during a time of great stress. Slowing down highlights how precious time in our relationships is. And then from there, I include this in lessons, or I use it with young people. But it's important that they, first of all, got it that it was for them. And that's a really key piece of learning. Don't hurry. Another key point is that it's a practice, not a theory. Otherwise, you can wind up feeling like this person if you overdo it. I haven't got all day. But you do need to sit with that difficulty sometimes, and to say, I don't want to just talk about mindfulness and theorize about it. I need to actually do it. So one simple thing we can all do is to find little bells of mindfulness, as you might call them, during our day, ways of coming back to ourselves. Stopping at a red traffic light instead of feeling irritated. Why not just sit and breathe, find your feet, find your breath. Many teachers in the book talked about how they used it in the classroom, walking between the desk and the whiteboard, particularly if they were feeling that they'd moved into their head and were getting agitated. And particularly if they felt they were losing it in the lesson, they could use that bell of mindfulness to come back to themselves. So our day is absolutely full of opportunities to just stop and breathe. Tiny practices make such a difference. Another familiar practice is following the breath, and I could tell us more about that tomorrow. Many exciting exercises to make this vivid for young people. Like one nice example was making origami boats and putting them on your tummy and watching some other child watching them go up and down and counting how many breaths and so on. Helping people to find their breath. Mindful eating, we've mentioned really. How do we help people to eat things slowly, to smell them, to actually bother to taste them instead of just shoveling them down? How to cultivate gratitude and a sense of connection with all the processes that brought that food to our table or to our mouth, and to build this sense of connection. And we start with tiny things. Children love chocolate meditation, or something small like a piece of fruit. Building out perhaps to a whole school picnic or a whole school lunch that is eaten mindfully and thoughtfully. But we start small, but it's such a vital practice. We teach ourselves and other people, children, to move and walk mindfully. In the same way you sat down, actually being aware you were sitting. How interesting. Many of us may go to yoga classes, but never quite be in the body. We're doing it like a form of exercise, actually coming back to that movement. And of course, vital practices, being with our emotions when they're difficult, not suppressing them, not ignoring them, not moving straight into positive thinking, but actually being with our anger and our difficulty. Thich Nhat Hanh has a lovely image of seeing your anger like a crying baby and just holding it gently and saying, I see you, yes, fine, I see you're there. And that the idea that the energy of mindfulness will gradually wrap that emotion and just make it calm of itself. But we don't have to deny them and push them away and pretend we're much nicer people than we are. And of course, it's all about how we communicate. Being a parent, being a teacher is a social activity. How do we bring this to our relationships and learn to really listen to each other and to speak from the heart? Now, we might want to use a program. I'm going to hurry along here a bit. There are many good programs around that we might say, right, I'm going to sign up for a program, and these are 4 or 5 of the ones we've found in Europe that are good, they've got an evidence base, and so on. So we might want to sign up for those. But we do need to be aware that if we go for a program, it can push us back into this energy of fix-it, where we think that there's something wrong with ourselves or with our students, and we need a program and a technique and a lesson to fix it. It's a magic bullet to sort of shoot through the difficulties, or we're going to douse down difficult emotions with a hose, or we're going to just stick an elastoplast on a difficulty and move on. So taking care that if we do choose a program, that we remember that it's not the program that's the main thing. The main thing is being fully present for people. And if we can get this right, everything else flows from that. And there's a couple of quotations there, which I better read because of the language thing, which is telling how to do it is not the real thing. Being deeply present is the real thing. And the most wonderful gift you can give a child is to make them feel seen, trusted, and accepted. And this is a quote I would like to read in full, even if time runs out on me, which it might. Only when I've taken care of myself and I'm able to show up for those around me, students and colleagues, the ability to hold space for others, to listen deeply and truly hear them and their experiences is invaluable. Stopping to take a breath and control my own nervous system, as well as practicing loving kindness and compassion when others are out of control, makes such a difference in how situations resolve themselves. And I love that quotation because it kind of encapsulates in a nutshell everything about how important it is, if we're teachers, if we're parents, if we're educators, to manage our own emotions, not denying them, not making out they're different, but just getting a handle on them, cradling them so that we can be of benefit to other people. And if we do this, it changes how we see ourselves and people in our family and our children. We may be tempted when other people are difficult to think, well, they're just mad, they're just not here, there's something wrong with them, or they're bad. What mindfulness can do is to change the paradigm, really, change the mindset. Perhaps they're sad, perhaps they're not bad, or perhaps a useful idea is that they're unskillful. Perhaps they just don't know how to manage things any better. And we gradually start to reorganize how we see our mindset on other people. And it connects with that idea of not being dualistic and only talking to people like ourselves, reaching out and really understanding that everyone's trying to make sense of their world. They're all human beings, they're all doing their best. How can we reach out to them? And just a final couple of thoughts, which is that it takes time. I haven't talked about other things I could talk about, like curriculum and how to integrate this into the school day, how to integrate it into subjects, into staff meetings and staff development. All of that can be done. And you will find lots of examples in the book of teachers actually developing a whole school approach to this. But what they would all say if they were here in a great 500 people would say to you, take it steady. Don't think that you know where to go when you want to push it straight away. If you get into the energy of pushing and haranguing people, you lose it, really. So many teachers said that when they stopped talking about mindfulness and started being mindful and actually practicing it, their colleagues started saying, now that's interesting, what are you doing? Why aren't you as impatient and angry as you used to be? They said then they very cautiously started talking about it. But we've got to take people with us. So let's start, key facts really, let's start with ourselves and make sure that we ourselves are practicing what we preach, and then we may, I think, be able to move it on out into our families and into our schools. I've often been asked by anxious parents, how do I teach my teenage child mindfulness? And I simply say, you don't. You absolutely don't. And we know this from our own children, that they've been saying for many years that when asked about mindfulness, because they keep being told about it, oh, that's some, and I won't even say the word, that mum teaches. It's not a very polite word. One of them who's having a lot of difficulties finally admitted quietly to her, the person who's helping her, that she finds mindfulness useful. But she said, but don't tell mum. So we do need to make sure that we sort out our own mindfulness and our own presence, and then that does at least 2/3 of the work. Okay, it does take a while. This is an interesting final quote to finish with. It took 15 years in a school in Thailand to really lay the foundations to be a whole school approach for this kind of thing. So let us take it steady. Okay, I'd like to end there with the final thought that whatever's happening in life, we can always breathe and smile. But I would give you a down bit of advice, which is, if smiling is going to get you punched, just breathe, because you never know what the other person's thinking. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Bueno, Gustavo Duc.
Gustavo Duc. He has a degree in veterinary sciences. He has been very much involved. I think you were part of that foundation, yeah? Veterinarians Without Borders. And he is also the heart and soul behind a magazine about food. Because of its connection, I recommend it highly because of its connection with the rural world. And he's very closely related to movements of peasants and different agricultural movements. Okay, Okay, I think if Albert bought the book, then it's the best publicity. So he has a book, a green book. It's many little people, and he's a storyteller as well. I suppose you're all familiar with Eduardo Galeano, a famous South American writer. He said of him that for some time now, he reads and enjoys the stories of Gustavo. And he has written books for children, but with one basic difference. His words do not help the children to sleep, but rather help them to wake up. So I give the floor to Gustavo Duc.
Buen día.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm from a little town in Tarragona, and I was very excited to see among all of the videos that you've shown the Castell de Colla de Vilafranca. They did a 4 of 9. It's the Human Towers. It was a 9-story, and they did it without any of the usual support. It's just the base, and it's one of the most difficult constructions in the world of Castellers, of the Human Towers. That's so typical in Catalonia. I would like to begin by bringing to this room a pastor. He is a pastor of sheep. He's a shepherd. And this shepherd, pastor, is one of the oldest professions, and I'm sure it's in almost all of those cultures that Albert has visited. His name is Jerome Aguado. I get more nervous than I am every time I say his name. And this is the case with many of us. We're invited to give speeches or talks, and the one I have about Jerome was this. In many of the talks that Jerome gives, in a very visible part of the room, he puts up a sign for people to know his work as a shepherd, his product. And if someone wants to write it down, he adds his telephone number. He does it, the text says in capital letters, I sell sheep. And only after answering many of the questions that people ask him, he thanks them because no one has wanted no one has corrected him of his mistake in the writing of the sign. Now, as you know, to sell in Spanish, vender, is written in V, and he says, thanks you for not wanting to embarrass this old shepherd. Many of you know about grammar and things of science, of mathematics, of engineering, and of computers, and all of these modern things that I am totally unaware of. But tell me, how many of you know how to raise a lamb? How many of you know how to turn grapes into wine? How many of you know how to produce your own food? I think that what Jeromo is saying is a call to all of us. And we've been talking about that this morning. Our disconnection with nature is closely related to our disconnection with the rural world and how food is produced. And to go into this topic, I have asked 3 girls to come up to the stage, Isabel, Claudia, and Caterina. With them, I would like to do a little dynamic, a little activity. I want to do a dynamic. Come on up, come on up, girls. You're supposed to bring a piece of paper and a pen, please. Could you all lend them a pen and a paper? Each one of them needs a sheet of paper and a pen. You're Isabel, you'll stand here, okay? You are? Caterina? Find some place where you can write on. I mentioned that sometimes I'm invited by universities or high schools or schools to give talks, and I like to begin with this game. On the images there on the screen, you're going to see an image, and you have to write down very quickly. And you can also do this if you like in the audience. You have to very quickly write down what you see. Define with one word what you see. And each of you should use your own, don't copy. For example, we have this first one. This is very easy. Write down Antena 3, which is a television channel. That's the logo. Okay, you can write on this. You can use the table. You can use the. I want you to be comfortable, and so you can write clearly. I'm going to go quickly, all right? Okay, let's continue. Let's see the next one. Another one. Let's continue. All right. Am I going too fast? All right, too fast, then slow down. Continue, let's continue. Okay, the audience, don't give them the answers. When I do this at schools, I can guarantee you that they're not as quiet as you are, and there's lots of noise going on.
Ya casi estoy acabando, chicas.
I'm almost done, girls. I think we're coming to the end, yes? This is the last one. Hey, do you think you've gotten them all? You all got them 100%, right? No one has any doubts about this, right? Let's see. Okay, if you'd like to come and stand near this microphone, what did you write down for the next one? And be honest. Cauliflower. Cauliflower. Very well. And here? Apple. Here? A sweet potato or a yam. Yam. Movie star. Broccoli.
Turnip.
Pepsi. And what did you write down for this? Nothing? You didn't have time, and now that you're seeing, what would you say? I have no idea. No? Anyone from the audience? A grapefruit? Do you remember the blood oranges Have you had one of those recently? It could be, right? It could be one of those. You don't know what the blood oranges are, do you? It has nothing to do with the Dracula, by the way. It's just a type of orange. What about here? El Corte Inglés? Here? Fish, sole. That way you'll never make a mistake. I didn't have time. She wrote down a sole. Did all of you know that? Yeah? Do you know that the sole, when they're born, they have the two eyes are totally symmetrical, but they move in the first weeks of their lives. But this is just to prove that I'm a veterinarian. Citroen, Renault, what else? I didn't have time. And what would you say it is? It's a pumpkin? Yes, a pumpkin. Adidas. Maybe some of you got some of them wrong, right? An avocado. Have you ever seen an avocado tree, or is it a plant? It's a tree. And you've seen them? Where? At my grandfather's home. Nike. I don't know. Leeks, spinach. In a secondary school, some 12-year-old children said marijuana. And I thought, well, good thing. Good thing that they must not have smoked very much of that McDonald's. This one's very difficult. Do you know what this is?
Los altramuces es esto.
This is, in Spanish, it's called altramuz. This is a fisherman. Fish. Fish. You don't know what fish this is? Tuna? Very good. It's not just in a can, it comes in this shape as well. Mercadona. Here it's sweet potato or yam. Did you know this? I thought it was a potato. And if they tell you that it's a sweet potato, you'd say yes? No. I still wouldn't. Carrefour. And the last one, it's a beet. Did you know that was a beet? No? Okay. Now, you got almost all of them. And even some, I mean, did you realize the trick that I had? Here it doesn't say El Corte Inglés. Just some of them have the logo, but they don't have the name of the brand, which usually should be there. And even so, these girls that have done a great job, I think I can safely say that you were better at identifying the brands than the foods. And this has to make us think in the society in which we live, where the brands have been introduced into our environment, have been conveyed to us in an invisible way since we've been born, but other things that are so important, that feed us, that are grown year-round, and that have been the backbone of the food of 10,000 years of culture, which we are realizing that in our society we have a problem that we have to figure out how we fix. That problem is reflected also in geographic data or demographic data. In Baleares, the Balearic Islands, only 10% of the population lives in the rural area in the countryside. In Catalonia, only 7% live in the rural world. So in the Balearic Islands, without counting tourism, 90% live in the cities. They live far from the rural environment. They live distanced from where food is created, where it's produced. They live in a space where the relationship with nature is difficult and even impossible. If we think of that rural population, that in the world is more than half of the population, if we think that only a few people like Jeromo work in the area of producing food, then from a statistical point of view, we'll understand the gravity of this situation. In Catalonia, in order to find a person that works in the primary sector, we have to bring together 300 people. It's one farmer for every 300 inhabitants. On the island of Mallorca, if I calculated it correctly yesterday, without taking into account tourism, you have a ratio of one person producing food while another 100 do not produce food. One farmer out of every 100 working in the primary sector. The physiocrats that were a line of philosophical thought said there's only one profession that is worthy of a salary, and that is the person that sows seeds, the person that cultivates, that grows, that harvests. That idea of placing, that we heard before, of one seed that is going to give us a tree, or Swiss chard, as we saw, or tomatoes. That person is able to produce important material, food, out of something that's almost invisible. The rest of the professions in the world, well, we don't produce anything. SEAT doesn't produce automobiles. SEAT transforms materials into the shape of a car. And those that write, we produce books. We take words, we put them on the pages, but we really don't produce anything. And this situation that is shared by more than half of the population that live in our big cities, this situation of active populations working in agriculture below 1%, as is the case of the Spanish state, well, there are consequences to this on a planetary scale, and some of them are extremely serious. If only one of every 100 people in Mallorca produce food, there's no other way to feed this island than to import food. If in Catalonia it's one of every 300 that produce food, we in Catalonia are vulnerable if we speak about food and food safety and security. We are vulnerable. How can that vulnerability be resolved? It can be resolved by filling the world with monocrops, with individual crops. We have three main crops, single crops. We have soy, corn, and wheat. With those 3 or 4 ingredients, we produce food that satisfies the needs, the basic needs of people on the entire planet, and most of all, those of us that live in the big cities. But the consequences of a planet that is invaded by these individual crops are many. They've been studied and mentioned, and it's very much talked about today related to the climate crisis, not climate change, but climate has a right to change, but what we're facing is a climate crisis produced by man, caused by man. We are responsible in this industrial model of agriculture. We have to give it its name. We are responsible for the generation of many CO2 gases, but most of all, the great crisis that planet Earth is subject to, and it's what we call hunger. Almost 1 billion people cannot eat because their land has been usurped by multinational corporations, by the states that are puppets of the food industry to take that land and place it under the machinery that will allow us in the rich countries to eat. The people that are migrating, the people that are living in caravans, the people that want to go past the walls and the fences, they are people that either because of war, but most likely because of this inability to produce their own food, they have no other choice. And we've also said this throughout the morning, that agriculture, that industrial intensive agriculture is responsible for climate change, for hunger, for poverty, and for the extinction of so many things. How many people here have seen a firefly or a lightning bug this summer? All of those of you that have raised your hand, and in a room of 400, it's maybe 6 or 7 people, keep your hand up if you've also seen this summer a praying mantis. No. I'm talking about the ones that already saw the firefly or the lightning bug. How many of you have also seen a praying mantis? There are about 5 people, 6, doesn't matter. When we talk about the 6th extinction, we're talking about an empirical bit of evidence, something that we can all see. The insects are disappearing, bees are disappearing. Satis, it's so beautiful when you explain the importance of the earth, of soil, of land and water to produce food, and the bees and that pollinate and that are disappearing because of this intensive industrial agriculture. But as Bandana Shiva says, the worst of these single crops is the single crop of thinking. And what we have behind these single crops, what we have behind these monocultures is the disappearance of the rural world, the disappearance of shepherds, of farmers. In the 6th extinction, they are the peasants are disappearing at the same rate as swallows. In Mallorca, for example, from 1999 to 2005, every day in Mallorca, from 1999 to 2005, 3 farms were closed, were shut down. This is the 6th extinction of the peasants, of the farmers. I would like to focus today, in the short time that I have left of my talk, to explain what it means to have brought an end to the peasant agriculture. It's not just a matter of not producing food nor the effects that we've mentioned, but also what it means from the point of view of nature, the cultural, economic, societal level, to have extinguished or practically extinguished what we know as the peasant culture. Tomorrow, I think I speak again, And I would like to insist then on what it means from the point of view of the education of boys and girls and what is also known as the nature deficit. Albert explained how in other cultures, and I will go into this tomorrow with some stories, but Albert explained that in many cultures, they're not afraid of death, nor do they venerate it as we do here in the West. But notice, take note, work on the garden. Look and see how a peasant cares for the garden. When you plant spinach, or carrots, for example, and you place all of the seeds in a row, when the sprouts begin to appear, the first thing they do is to remove some of the sprouts so that the others can grow well. And we're not worried about that micro selection, that tiny death, because that death is part of the cycle of life that will allow the other carrots or spinach to grow stronger in the garden. When you cannot, well, when there is a cauliflower that has begun to spoil and you cannot harvest it, that is not something that's lost. It's something that goes back to the compost. And once again, death is the beginning of life. And all of these reflections, well, tomorrow I will go into greater detail. But I think we need to look for other reflections, other thoughts of what it means for us to get away from the culture of the peasants. We work in a productivist world, in a productivist culture, where from a young age, we are told that what we have to do is to produce, produce, and produce. If we have a problem in the world today, it's because of overproduction. And that's why it's important to select. When the children are told you have to go out and eat the world, you have to take over the world. That's the world. That's the way the world is, because we're devouring it. We're being told that we have to produce incessantly over and over. And if you look to see what a gardener does, a farmer does on his farm, they're not repeating the cycle of production. They are repeating the virtuous cycle of reproduction. An agriculturalist, a farmer, is not trying to produce more and more, but rather trying to make it possible for the land to remain fertile for many years and leave to those that come behind land that has healthy soil. The farmer returns the loan that we've been given, and the word, well, it's a way of returning the loan that has been given to us from earth in order to maintain that infinite cycle of the earth, of the soil. The farmers, without knowing it, they convey what the movements tell us. They place life at the center. The peasant world has known how to organize itself, and the social movements are asking for new formulas for our society, and we organize ourselves and we attend assemblies where we want to make the decisions in our neighborhoods or in our towns. That is what has always been done in the peasant cultures. There are figures such as the councils under the sacred tree of the village or by the bell tower of the village church. The elders of the church met to talk about the issues of the village, the aspects of real democracy, where each home votes, each family has a vote. Of course, anything that I can say about the rural world is not different from understanding and recognizing that not everything is that ideal and beautiful, but I think when we have abandoned it as we have, we need to take that extreme approach. As Albert said earlier, he was surprised how in his travels he found places where they don't know private property. Of course not. Private property is a principle of capitalism, but in the rural world, they've known for centuries and centuries, millenniums, to know how to work and not have private property and to share the territory, to share the land so that every family could have land for their crops. But when you talk about common land, well, it's like the mountain where you can go with your flocks of sheep or go to gather wood. It's been that way for millenniums. And we are not familiar with that. We're not accustomed to that. But we have to recognize that our time here on this planet is short. We're talking in social movements of finding new solidarity and social movements. There is an important movement of the economy of the common good. In the rural world, it has always been a way of being able to guarantee the life of the community work, the work that's done for mutual support. And as a matter of fact, we continue to use the nomenclature in the Valencian part of Spain. When someone goes to work in someone else's farm, it's called tornallom, which that person will be given a day of work so that he can return for more complicated tasks. Examples of collaborative communities. Such as in the Pyrenees Mountains, for example, when the entire town assigns in a rotation who is going to go up to the common mountaintops, to the common areas of the woods with all of the flocks of the entire village and thus come back and return them to each family. Or situations of solidarity when a beast of burden, an ox or a bull or a horse, died as a cause of an accident, all of the villagers would buy part of that animal. That animal was eaten in a small celebration, and that way they were returning the income to the person that had had a very serious loss with the death of that beast of burden. Imagine what it means to look towards that way of working, that common economy. And let's also think why is that being extinguished? It's because the rural world has a wave of anarchism, and that is the most effective way of fighting against capitalism. Capitalism has always wanted to do away with what's autonomous and what's sovereign, and that is the rural world and the world of the peasants. I would like to finish by asking those of you that are teachers here for a favor. Those of us that accumulate lots of youth, such as myself, when we were young in school, we were given a book that we had to study. And it said, Rules for Urban Living. Well, I would like to ask you to teach your students about the rules of rural life. Thank you very much.
Soy José Mujica.
I am Jose Mujica. I am a peasant. In the first stage of my